Hi, I'm Ryan, and welcome once again to Haunted Highways. Tonight, we're in a somewhat different kind of location. We're in a very nondescript, generic location because tonight we're not going to cover a specific haunted situation. Instead, I'm going to talk about the 5 stories that I am not going to cover on this channel. Now, it's not because I'm scared or worried about going to these locations. I personally love creepy places like Pendleton Road. I'll be honest, Pendleton Road scares the hell out of me. It's dark, it's quiet, it's creepy, but it's a great story. And again, it's one we've already covered. But there are 5 stories from this region that I am familiar with that I don't cover for various reasons. And for each story, I'll tell you what the story is, and I'll tell you why we're not going to go there, or why I'm not going into any detail on the specifics of it. Now, the first of these stories, you've probably heard this before, is a story about, and I've heard about this just a couple miles from where I am right now in Colton, a railroad crossing where a school bus supposedly stalled on the railroad tracks and was struck by a train, killing most, if not all, of the children on board. And now, if you stop your car on those railroad tracks, your car will be pushed off the tracks by an unseen force. And they say if you put talcum powder on your back bumper, after this happens, you will see small child fingerprints on the back bumper of your car. Now, there's the main reason why I'm not telling the story is because this is a true story, the story did not originate in Colton. In fact, it didn't originate in California. This story originally took place at a railroad crossing in Texas many years ago, and it's one of these stories that just gets retold again and again. Every location, every city, or every region, somebody tells, oh, it's this crossing down the road, or it's this crossing by my house, it's this one, it's that one. I've heard this story told at 5 or 6 different locations in the Inland Empire. And it's a great story, and again, the one in Texas, there could be a lot of truth and validity to it. I'm not in Texas, so I don't know for sure. But the story just keeps getting retold again and again in every different location. Sort of like you hear the stories of people picking up a hitchhiker, a woman in a white dress who asked to be taken home, and they drive to the house and they go to the door and they say that their daughter died years ago, and they go back out to the car and the girl's gone, has vanished. That story's been told over and over again in different cities, and this railroad crossing story is very much the same way. Now, the second myth that I'm going to talk about, or talk about not talking about, if that makes any sense, is Gravity Hill. Because Gravity Hills are yet another one of these stories that every region you go to, almost every city in America, someone says they know about a Gravity Hill. This is a spot where you can supposedly stop your car on a section of road, put it in neutral, and the car will roll uphill. Up in the San Bernardino Mountains, there's supposedly one. There's also one right outside the main entrance of the Glen Helen Pavilion. There's right by the freeway, there's a section where people say your car will roll uphill. The reason I don't cover these is, besides there being so many of them, is because almost without exception, they are optical illusions. There are sections where the entire, people will drive down a road and the road will look level and flat, and it'll seem to slant uphill slightly, but when they drive their car up, the car seems to, and put it neutral, the car seems to coast uphill. And the car will indeed coast in some of these locations. But what they're not realizing is that the terrain they thought was level is actually slanted a little bit. And because everything is slanted, your body just doesn't notice it. So you think you're standing on a level road, you're actually standing on a slant. And then when you get down to where the road starts to go a little bit uphill, it's actually still going because everything's slanted. It's still on a downhill angle. So it looks like it's downhill, but it's actually still an uphill grade on the road, and it's just an optical illusion. It's a trick with the eyes. I've seen some of these places, and yeah, it looks like it's uphill, but it's really not. It's just the trick. When everything is slanted, it's hard to gauge what angle you're really at. So again, the stories, there's at least 3 of them in this area, and wherever you live, you've probably heard of one too. But unfortunately, as far as I can tell, none of them are real. Now, the third one I'm not going to talk about is a place that actually very well could have some paranormal activity, and that is the small town of Gausti. Now, you've probably never heard of it. It's actually a small little former community. It's not really a town anymore. Right outside the Ontario airport, Ontario, California. And it was basically, they built the Gausti winery in the 1880s, 1890s. And this winery, they built a little community for all the workers to live in, and it became its own town, the town of Gausti. It has since closed down. However, the abandoned buildings are still there, and it's a very creepy spot. The old winery buildings, it's all fenced off. I think most of them are condemned, so you can't go into them anymore. But there's a lot of stories of paranormal activity there. The reason I don't cover them is because some years back, a group put together a very well designed and very well presented haunted house on that site. It was called the Haunted Vineyard, and you actually went through the old vineyard buildings, and it was a great haunted house. They did an amazing job with it. They had a great backstory about a train wreck. There's a set of train tracks that run right between the winery and the airport, and there was a train wreck and people died, and they were buried there, and the souls got into the vines. I mean, when you break it down, it was really about haunted grapes, but the way they presented it was actually really, really well done. They had a great movie at the beginning that tells you the whole story. The problem is now, anytime I hear a ghost story about that area, it's incorporating a train wreck or other elements from their story, which was completely made up. They've acknowledged it was a completely fictional story. So there could be some paranormal activity there, but because that haunt was so well known and the story was, again, so well told, I think their movie's on YouTube, again, it's called The Haunted Vineyard, that it's kind of contaminated whatever true stories might be out there. It's just too hard to tell the truth from the fiction, unfortunately. But again, that site could very well have some activity, very creepy, very unusual spot. It is, you can't really, like I said, it's all fenced off, you can't really visit it, but if you want to drive by, it's right off the 10 freeway, right in front of the airport in Ontario, California. Now, the fourth spot is the Norton Air Force Base. Now, I know some of you out there are going to say, Ryan, you've been to Norton Air Force Base, you've done that story. And you're right, I did do a story about government-constructed flying saucers in the big hangar. That story absolutely did. But there's actually a second myth with that space. The second myth is that the moon landings were faked in that big hangar. They actually used that big hangar as a soundstage to fake the Apollo moon landings. Now, two reasons I'm not covering that. One, I personally believe the moon landings are real. If you disagree with me, feel free to fill up the comments with all the reasons why I'm stupid. But from, I'm a science nerd. From everything I've seen, everything I've read, I'm pretty confident the moon landings are real. You'd need more conspiracies to fake them than you would to make them happen. But the second reason I'm not going to go into that is because it seems that I've only heard the rumor a few places, and every place I've heard it, it seemed to have originated from a single line of dialogue in a movie. And that was the 1992 film Sneakers, where Dan Aykroyd, who plays a former government agent, he's putting microphones on an agent to go in and carry out an assignment. And he says, yeah, these are the same microphones that we used to fake the Apollo moon landings. We shot up an empty rocket, and the whole thing was filmed on the Norton Air Force Base. I can't find any source of that legend besides that one line of dialogue in the movie. So I don't think it's really an established urban myth. It's just something they wrote into the script. I don't know if they picked Norton at random, or maybe Dan Aykroyd read something somewhere. He's very much into the unexplained and the paranormal, as many of you may know. So it may have seeds of truth in it. Well, I mean, I don't think so, but I could be wrong. But regardless, it seems like that myth just was a line in a movie and not really an urban legend or something that we should really spend time going into. Now, the last location I want to talk about, which is actually my favorite, which kind of breaks my heart we can't cover it, it's not paranormal in any way. It is just really weird. It's also one of the more well-known ones, and that is the Yucaipa Watchers. You may have heard of them already. The Yucaipa Watchers, they had Facebook pages, they're on social media. One guy I talked to, he said he had friends come in from out of state, and they go, hey, you live in Yucaipa, can we go see the Yucaipa Watchers? The Yucaipa Watchers were a group of people, supposedly a family, that lived in a home in Yucaipa, and anytime anybody drove by the house and just came to a stop in front of the house, didn't even get out of the car, just came to a stop in front of the house, within usually less than 20 seconds, somebody would come out of the house and either shine usually at night, flashlight at them, or a big, huge, bulky, old school cordless phone, at least act like they're calling the cops, might have been doing it for real, or yelling at people. I mean, you go on YouTube and search for Yucaipa Watchers, there's tons of videos of people going by. In the daytime, they'd yell at you. They say it's a family that lived there. I've actually been up there several times. And every time I've been there, they come out with 100% reliability. And I drove up there at like 1 or 2 in the morning a couple of times. And I didn't yell, didn't do anything rude. I just stopped my car in front of the house, didn't kill the engine. And within 20 seconds, the front door would open. And it was always a heavy-set younger man who'd come out with, again, either a cell phone, a flashlight, or he'd just stand there like this. And no one really knows why. There's all kinds of rumors. Maybe they're drug dealers, or people even were saying human trafficking. Maybe other people were saying that they had other kinds of just illegal activity in the house. There's even a really tragic story that I don't know if it's true or not, that they said they had family members that were killed by somebody who they knocked on their door and they answered it, and their family members were killed by somebody at their door. There's dozens of stories, dozens of legends. Like I said, there used to be Facebook groups about them, and they were 100% real. Literally every time I went up to their house, no matter the time of night, the younger gentleman would always come out. It looked like they had a video camera pointed out the front window, so probably hooked to a TV or some kind of display monitor so they could see when people are there. But the reason we're not covering that is because, unfortunately, several years ago, they appear to have left. I went up to show somebody the house, and I had trouble finding it, because not only did they apparently move, but the house has been completely renovated. It used to be kind of a ratty old house. It's been completely remodeled, completely repainted. I had to go back on Google Earth to look at the old house to try and figure out which of the pretty houses I was looking at was theirs, because it was literally unrecognizable. So unfortunately, that story, 100% true, 100% real, but also 100% invalid these days, because the Yucaipa Watchers have left. So unfortunately, those 5 stories will not be covered in detail on this channel. We will not be going to any of those places. Fortunately, though, the Inland Empire has tons of ghost stories and other unusual activities, and those we will be covering on later episodes. So once again, I'm Ryan. Thank you for visiting us on Haunted Highways. Have a great night.